Hi, I'm Norm Abram. Welcome to the new Yankee Workshop. You're catching us right in the middle of our mini-series on building a custom kitchen in our own workshop. We've had 2 episodes on kitchen cabinet basics. We've had an episode on the hot wall where you find the stove and the ovens. We've also had an episode on the wet wall where you find the sink and the dishwasher. Today it's time for a pantry. That's next, right here in the new Yankee Workshop. Well, pantries have been in American homes for over 200 years, and they were often an unheated room set off at the back of the house, like the one that was in my grandfather's old farmhouse. And in that you would find shelves, and on the shelves you would find preserves that they had made or vegetables that they had canned from their own garden. You might even find crocks of different items and maybe even some smoked meats. But eventually pantries went out of fashion. So by the time my father built our family house in 1950, there was no pantry, but a lot of cabinets. In one you might find the cereal and other dry goods. In another, things my mother would use for baking. But everything was spread out. Now kitchen designs change over time, and eventually the pantry came back in a big way. Now the kitchen that we were redoing that was built 30 years ago had a pantry cupboard, and it worked pretty well. The pantry is one of the most heavily used areas in the kitchen. The one that exists here now has fixed shelves, and that's risky because there's always a need to make a slight adjustment for the items that you're trying to store. So I'm going to use adjustable shelves in the next one. The shelves are notched out, and that's a good idea because it allows light to shine through so you can see what's in the pantry. We have open space above, and we've made a commitment to close that off. So I'm going to build it right to the ceiling. I think we're missing an opportunity here. Because these shelves are notched out, when the door is closed, there's an unused void there. So what if I build a box on the inside of the door for smaller items, and that way, when the door is closed, that space is being used. Now the refrigerator. This one sticks out about 6 inches in front of the cabinets. Today they make shallower refrigerators so that we can keep the plane of the kitchen all in one straight line. So we're going to build the refrigerator into a box, and because the opening for the refrigerator is 7 feet, we're just going to lose that empty space up there. Let's get started. Here's the carcass for our new pantry, and I put it together using construction techniques that you've seen in earlier episodes. It's made out of 3/4 inch pre-finished plywood. There are 5 pieces. The bottom shelf and the top shelf are joined with a rabbet joint. Here's the rabbet, it goes along the bottom, and the shelf just intersects it like this. So using glue and screws, that makes a nice tight joint. If you come around the back, we have a solid 3/4 inch thick plywood back that sits in a groove or a dado. Now the construction there is all assembled with glue and screws, which makes a very strong case. On the front edges, there's a groove all the way around to receive biscuits from the face frame. Now when I build a cabinet this large, I have to consider the width and the depth in order to stand it up in the new space. Now this cabinet is 88¼ inches tall, but that doesn't mean I can stand it up in an 88-inch space. The diagonal is what's key. If I measure the diagonal, it's over 92 inches. So if the ceiling is any less than 92, I'm not going to be able to stand it up. Now our ceiling is just under 8 feet. That means I'll be able to stand this up when I get it in the house, but I want this cabinet to be only 1 inch from the ceiling. So I've built the base separately. With the base in place, I'll be able to lift the cabinet vertically and set it on the base. Now, if you're thinking about building your own kitchen, a home video of this project will be available, and you'll hear more about that before the program ends. Now I need to make the face frame. The face frame is solid poplar, and that's going to cover the edges of the plywood and give me a place to hang the door. Unlike previous doors and face frames we made, which were 3/4 inch stock, I'm using 1 inch stock because the door is going to carry a lot of weight. The face frame joints will be done with pocket screw joinery. You've seen us use that before. And there's going to be a bead detail around the inside of the face frame. I want to make the beads next. Before we use any power tools, let's talk about shop safety. Be sure to read, understand, and follow all the safety rules that come with your power tools. Knowing how to use your power tools properly will greatly reduce the risk of personal injury. And remember this, there is no more important safety rule than to wear these safety glasses. I've set up my router table with a beading bit. It makes the bead as well as a little reveal. Now in the past, we've taken stock, run a bead, and then ripped a piece away, and then applied it to the face frame. Today I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to make the bead on the actual face frame piece and remove material where they get joined a little bit later. Now when I run the bead, I have two feather boards. I want to keep the stock tight to the table because if it comes up, I'm going to ruin the bead. I also want to keep it tight against the fence because if it goes away, I'm going to have to run the stock through again. Now that the bead is made, I want to join these pieces together, and I want to have a tight butt joint between here and here. I don't want the bead to show. So I want to remove the bead. I'm going to make a slight miter cut right here and then cut it even with this edge. And then on this piece, I'll make a miter to match, and that'll allow the two pieces to come together absolutely even without a bead. To make that little miter cut in the stiles, I've tipped my saw blade to 45 degrees. I have my miter gauge set up, and I have this stop block, and you can see that it aligns with the mark. That way both stiles will be cut exactly the same. Here's the setup to rip the bead away. I've raised the blade to maximum height. I've put a mark across from the miter, square across, and I've also put a mark at the leading edge of the blade. I'm going to run it in carefully and shut down before I remove it. Okay, well, I want to move my fence a little bit closer because part of this shoulder is still remaining. I want to clear that out. Once I get it just right, the rest of it will be cleaned up with a chisel. So now I can just pop off most of it and then just take a nice sharp chisel and carefully remove the excess. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's see how it fits. With the bead mitered on the rails, we can check the fit, and that's going to be good. We'll put it together with some pocket screws. This jig makes it easy to form the pocket and the pilot hole for the screw. Okay, a little bit of glue on the joint and this clamp to hold them flush while I drive the screws home. Before I attach the face frame, I want to show you a detail. This is the bottom shelf, and so that the core of the plywood would not show, I installed a thin piece of veneer, same maple as the plywood itself. The reason for that is that the face frame is only going to come about halfway onto that. I don't want to see the plywood, and it acts as a stop for the door. It also leaves very little room for biscuits to attach to the face frame. Therefore, another piece. One of the things that I like about this system is that by having this continuous groove in the carcass, when I cut the slots in the face frame, I don't have to space them exactly the same. They'll fit no matter where I put them. Yeah. Okay, perfect fit. Now a few clamps. Well, while this sets up, let's take a moment to visit a kitchen in a town not far from here, designed and built by the cabinet shop we visited in episode 2, where there's a pantry I want to show you. But it's much more than a pantry. Let's take a quick tour of this kitchen. Start out with the refrigerator right here, and next to that, the hot wall, big commercial oven, nice tile backsplash, and a good vent hood above it. And check this out. Over here, this slides out, so all the spices are quickly available to the chef. And now we start to see the actual cabinetry itself. Beautiful cherry. And it's a full overlay design. Up above, we have some glass panel cabinets, and you'll note that the mutton bars align with the shelves that are behind for the storage of the goods. Beautiful marble countertops with a marble sink, a custom marble sink. Over here, the dishwasher is hidden behind these wooden panels, And on the end, a nice detail. This beadboard has a slight curve to it. And I like these corners. They're very furniture-like. They look like the leg of a table. Across the way, an island with a huge chunk of teak that cantilevers off the corner. It's a prep area. There's a disposer down there. And on this side, another curved area. And I like these doors. They have a panel on the bottom and glass on the top. That's a little unusual, but it's a really nice look. And over here, a beautiful wall of cherry. I mean, look at this wall. It's gorgeous. Behind these doors, the microwave. Down below, a toaster oven. Another piece of countertop. And here we have a wine chiller. And here we'll begin to see the beginning of the pantry. These doors open out with storage on the inside, something we want to do. Some adjustable shelves. More storage down below here where there are plenty of dry goods. And then, through this door, is the bulk of the pantry storage. A lot of storage in here. Some shallow shelves that are curved, solid wood, for safety as well as for a nice look. Over here, we have one fixed shelf, and then the shelves below are adjustable, as well as the ones up above. Plenty of storage in here. And on this side, more shelves and some vegetable storage bins. Well, this is a great example of a kitchen that's been well thought out, well designed, and beautifully crafted. Congratulations to all who were involved. Well, even though we're not going to build a pantry that large, there were a lot of good ideas there. Now, laid out on the table are the parts for our door, basically the frame, which is going to incorporate its own storage system. Rails and stiles. They'll end up with 4 panels that I'll trim with this molding, just like the one we've used on other doors. The first step is to make a groove in all the parts. The groove will receive the panel, as well as the tenons that I'll be forming on the rails. Using my dado, I've created a groove that's 3/8 of an inch wide and 1/2 an inch deep. You notice that it's offset, and that's so that it receives the molding correctly, which is going to wrap the panel. Here's the setup for the first pass to form the tenon. Stacked dado, sacrificial fence, and my miter gauge. Of course, I'll have to use 2 heights to complete the tenon. Now I've just raised the dado up slightly for the second pass on the tenon, and that fits just right, just a slip fit. All right, now for a little assembly. I've already clamped the center stile to all the rails, and now I'm sliding these MDF panels in. And I use MDF because it takes paint beautifully and it's very stable. It's not going to come and go a lot. I don't feel that there's any need to glue these panels in place at this stage. However, when I do wrap the inside with moldings, I will glue those and they will lock the panels. The diagonals are equal, which means the door is nice and square. I'll let it sit in the clamps overnight, and tomorrow we'll hang it and build the storage that's going to go on the inside. Well, good morning. I thought I'd get started today by installing the panel moldings around our pantry door. You may recall that I manufactured this molding using my router on the router table. I'm cutting the moldings using the table saw and my miter gauge, which has this adjustable stop. And that's very valuable because once I determine a length, I can cut repetitive pieces exactly the same. Now when I cut the long panel moldings, I cut them just a hair longer so that I can spring them in place, and that gives me a nice tight joint. I'm going to secure them with some glue and some pins. Now here's the pins. They're very small nails with no head, just a sharp point on one edge. I only use enough to hold it in place while the glue sets. Now for glue, I'm just going to run a small bead on that edge, and then another bead along this edge of the molding. And set it in place. Well, now would be a good time to drill the holes in the carcass for the adjustable shelf pins. I have this jig. It's a piece of plexiglass with a series of holes evenly spaced, and you can use whichever one's the most convenient. What I'm going to do is take that jig and align it with a center line I've put on the cabinet, right there. Now the second part of the system is the drill bit. This drill bit has a retractable collar that fits into the holes of the jigs, which exposes the bit and also stops to drill the hole to the correct depth. The first thing I'm going to do is drill a hole right on that center line. Now with that drilled, I can slide the jig down, lock it in place with a pin, and drill a series of holes. And I can keep moving it down until I get as many holes as I need. Now that last hole is about 15 inches up from the bottom. I think that'll be okay. I can always add more later. Now this series of holes down the center of the back will be very useful because it's going to prevent the shelves from sagging. Now this piece of poplar is going to get installed behind the top rail, and it will give us a stop for the door to close against. Now for the shelves of our pantry, we're using more of this pre-finished plywood, and that's a good choice because I want a nice durable surface. Cans and so forth are going to be sliding over it. I want something that's tough. I also want something that's easy to clean up. Now we're going to add an edge to conceal the core of the plywood. It's a piece of solid maple, and it's a little bit wider than the plywood itself. I want the shelves to have a look of thickness, plus it will add some strength to also help prevent sagging. To hang our door, I'm going to use some nice heavy butt hinges. There are going to be 4 on this door because I want a lot of good support. I want to mortise them in place, so I'm going to make a little jig to do the mortising. I could chisel them out, but that takes a long time. It takes a few minutes to make a jig. I'm going to use my router, which is set up with a 5/8 inch outside diameter collar and a 3/8 inch bit, the difference being a 1/4 inch. So I've laid out for the hinge, leaving 1/8 of an inch on each side. I'll make this cutout at the table saw by nibbling away the material. Now I'm going to add this small cleat, which will register it on the door and the face frame. Now, before I actually route the mortises in the door and the face frame, I'm going to do a test on a scrap to check the depth and the fit. The width is pretty good, and might make the depth just a bit shallower. I'm going to mortise the face frame first, and I've located the top of the hinge 7 inches down from the top rail. Well, now I've set the door into the face frame, and I've checked the margin at the bottom and at the top, and that's the same. So now I can take a utility knife and just mark each butt hinge, and then I'll mortise them using the same techniques. Now the only trick here is to make sure that I drill the holes for the screws nice and straight. If they're crooked, the head will stick above the hinge and the door will get hinge bound. Now we are going to have storage on the back side of the door. And it will be mostly small goods, small cans, some bottles. There'll be a series of trays that will start right about here and go up another 5 feet. Now there's one special request from the chef in this kitchen, and that's to take this box of plastic wrap and get it out of the pantry and have it accessible from the inside of the door. So we'll take care of that too. The whole system starts out as a box made up of 1/2 inch plywood that's already been pre-edged. I've rabbited the back edges of all 4 pieces. I'll assemble it, put the back on, and later that will get attached to the inside of the door. Now this is the bottom, some glue and a few pins to hold it. Now at the top I'm using a miter joint with a biscuit to reinforce it. The back drops into these rabbets and will be locked in place with some glue and clamps and a few pins if necessary. Here's a mock-up of what I'm going to be putting in that box we just built. This represents the box. These are the trays made out of the same pre-finished plywood. The corners are done with box joints. They're a very strong joint when they're glued up. On the end, you'll see an angled slot, and that intersects with these hardwood pieces, which actually hold the tray in place. And they're angled so that when you open the door quickly, these won't pop out. To make the box joints, I'm using my dovetail jig set up for box joints with 1/4-inch spacing. I'm using my router with a collar and a 1/4-inch bit. First, I'm going to do the front and back pieces. Now I'm making grooves for the bottom, and it's not as easy as it might seem. I have to do a stopped groove, otherwise the groove would show through the end of the box joint. Therefore I use the router. Now there are a lot of glue surfaces. It's no wonder this box joint is so strong. And finally, a bottom gets slipped in place, and then the other end goes on. This unlikely contraption is a jig with a couple of those trays I just made mounted underneath, held in place with some cleats. I needed a jig because I have to make these angled slots that connect to the runners that hold the trays in place. Now, because the slot is angled, I need a jig that has mirror images. One slot goes in one direction, the other one goes in the opposite direction. I also found that it was easier if I did a pair at a time. Now I'm going to swap them around. This one goes on this direction. This one goes on this side. Reset the jig and route the slot on the other end. Now these little runners are solid maple, and I'm installing them now just with a couple pins. When the final locations are determined, I'll use some glue and some small screws. With the box for the trays attached to the inside of the door with a few screws, we'll permanently attach it later when the door is painted. You now get to see how this is going to work. We'll make a few more trays, which will drop in on those runners. There'll be at least 6 of those. Now inside, we're going to have 5 more shelves, plus the bottom of the cabinet. That gives us 17 linear feet of 1.5 foot deep storage. This is going to be a very useful pantry. Here it is, our pantry, all painted up. I think this is the largest cabinet door that I've ever built. And this storage on the inside of the door, that's working out very well. Plenty of room for canned goods and jars, and the chef particularly likes this special shelf for the food wrap. Plenty of adjustable shelves, starting to get filled up now, and a door-activated switch so the light comes on so you immediately see what's in there. A pantry. Everyone needs one of these. They may be a challenge to build, but indispensable in any well-equipped kitchen. Now let's talk about what we're going to build next time. It wouldn't be a modern kitchen without a place for a TV, a computer, the telephone, a few files, and maybe even a couple pencils. So next time we'll be building an office for our kitchen right here in the new Yankee Workshop. If you've enjoyed this new Yankee project, you may want to try some of the others. There are projects meant for the workshop, the garden, the kitchen, and many more. So whether you're a fan of Shaker style, or colonial, arts and crafts, or Chippendale, there may be a Norm project
you'd like to build. Whether it's a clock or a gazebo, a picnic bench or a Windsor chair, a child's toy or a sailboat, visit the New Yankee website at www.newyankee.com for a complete listing.